say, kids, what time is it?
Hey everybody, Keith here from GeekTime TV, and I am going to do a quick little sort of review of Picard Episode 1. I don't plan on reviewing all 10 episodes of this Season 3, the final season. But I just wanted to get some thoughts out of the way on the first one, mostly because I think I have a rather unpopular opinion of Star Trek Picard Season 3. And let me just tee it up by saying that there's a lot of hype coming into this. A lot of people that I value their opinion and their lifelong respect of Star Trek have been just building this up for the last 6 months. People like Robert Meyer Burnett, Mark Altman, Darren Doctorman, and others. And I've watched a lot of YouTubers' reviews, and I'm surprised people like Gary Beekler at Nerdrotic, Dave Cullen, have been singing its praises. But I'm kind of with Bird of Prey 5. If you haven't watched The Bird give his channel a look, he did a 90-minute review, and I'm kind of on the same page with him. And I thought it was just me, and I'm glad that there's another voice out there that I respect, like Birds, who's a major Star Trek fan, that also had a lot of the same issues with it that I did. Let's jump right into it then, shall we? Right off the bat, the first scene kind of put me off right away. Just to back the truck up a bit, Season 1 of Picard, I got 3.5 episodes in before I said I've had enough of this. You can see that the people in charge don't really know anything about Star Trek. They're trying to turn this into something it's not, and the deconstruction of Jean-Luc Picard was all that I could handle. Like, it was just getting... I think there was a scene in episode probably 3 when the character of Raffi was introduced, and she started berating him for his white privilege and that he was a rich white guy. And keep in mind, they don't use money in the 24th century. Not in Starfleet, anyway. And this is a former Starfleet officer that Picard was trying to re-enlist, and she just went off on him. She's vaping. Stuff that's just too modern for something that was supposed to be part of an optimistic future about exploration and perfecting the human species going forward. And instead we're back to race and gender wars and class warfare and money, and it made no sense to me. And it's obvious Alex Kurtzman is a hack and he's in charge of this stuff, and I'd had enough. So I didn't even bother with Season 2. However, I watched enough YouTube reviewers to know exactly what went on in both of those seasons. So right away, we're treated to this scene where there's a ship cruising through space, and it gets there's another ship in pursuit, and it gets boarded. And the first person we see is Beverly Crusher, with a heavily Botoxed Gates McFadden.
A sexist would say.
She gets up and starts gets into a firefight with these two aliens with like hawk masks or something that board the ship. And right off the bat, I'm like, okay, here we go. It's dark. It's dystopian. We have a doctor, a Starfleet doctor, someone who has pledged her life to preserving life in all beings. Probably the kindest soul, arguably, aside from Deanna Troi on the Next Generation crew, with a phaser rifle, and she's vaporizing these guys. She's not even shooting to stun or to wound. She's vaporizing them. And the second one, she hits the first one, he just immediately vaporizes. She hits the second one, and he goes down, presumably dead, and then she runs over, stands over him, and then another point that Bird brought up, which is great, has to pump the phaser rifle, which makes no sense at all. That's just freaking dumb. And then disintegrates this prone being into ash. The opening scene immediately brought back to mind the Terminator 7 of 9 that they have created. So they've taken two characters from Star Trek Voyager and Star Trek The Next Generation and turned them into bloodthirsty assassins. And so right away, I'm kind of like, here we go again.
It's okay, you're okay.
What the?
So the good doctor decides to vaporize two beings and then runs over and records a heavily coded message and sends it to Jean-Luc Picard, who is at the chateau, and he's packing up all his memorabilia, if you will, from his past, because he's going to give it to a Starfleet museum that's curated by Geordi now, and he's going to go off with the Romulan woman that lives with him, whose name I can't, Laris, and presumably start a new life together somewhere else. And he's, heavily nostalgic, and he's writing a letter that night, and he hears his communicator badge from Enterprise D. That's about 30 years old at this point. He says 20 in the show, but it's about 30 since the last time they wore those comm badges, a little over 30. And just happens to be sitting on the table across from him in a little trunk with his old uniform in it.
That's pretty fucking thin. That's very thin.
And pulls out the communicator badge, which is chirping away, and decodes it using his old Alpha Tango coding, and figures out it's from Beverly. And the message says, I'm stuck in this, blah, blah, blah system out on the edge of the galaxy, and don't share this with anyone, don't trust anyone, even Starfleet. So Picard runs to a Starfleet officer, William T. Riker. And it's kind of funny. Riker's hanging out at this bar, and they've got, it's like they're going to celebrate what they call it, like Frontier Day or something, which is a 250th anniversary of the founding of the Federation. A lot of people online are like, oh, Starfleet was before Enterprise and Captain Archer. And yeah, Starfleet was, but not the Federation. The Federation was formed in the very last episode of Enterprise. And this day is supposed to celebrate this Frontier Day or whatever they're calling it. And they have these at Guinan's bar. She's selling these Eagle Moss. I have it right here. This is the same damn thing. It's on the stand. I mean, the prop people didn't even try. I started laughing when I saw this. So anyway, Picard shares what he found, and this thing, the writing is so sloppy and lazy, in my opinion, here, because the chain of events for Beverly's plan to work have to be so perfectly timed out. Like, how does she know that Picard even still has his old comm badge? And then she uses this 30-year-old code, or we'll say 20-year-old code going forward, because that's what they say in the show, but we know it's older than that. Hoping that he'll be able to remember how to decode it or have the ability to decode it. And worse, he brings it to Riker, and then Riker says, wow, while you were compromised as Locutus, we put in this special something. I forgot what he says, but basically you have to add the number 3 to everything in this coded message to get the exact coordinates. Those coordinates are wrong. Just goofy ass crap.
That does not make sense.
Riker decides that they need to get a Starfleet ship to go out there because it's on the fringe of the galaxy, the edge of Federation space. So in the meantime, the character Raffi's back, and she's posing as like a drug dealer, druggie, I don't know, whatever she is. She's undercover for Starfleet, and her mission is to gather information on the Red Lady. It kind of, at this point, I was starting to just zone out because it's just not interesting. I just wasn't interested in this, and it's just kind of drudge, it was really, really tough to get through this hour. It felt like 3 hours to me. And I was really disappointed because I went in with high hopes. Anyway, so she goes to her like dealer to try to get information on him. And then it's really funny because she's supposed to be this, undercover agent. And she goes outside and right outside in the street and calls someone on an old flip communicator.
Like I said, Finn.
So meanwhile, Riker and Picard, and this is the one part of the show that was done, I thought, beyond fantastic. This was the coolest part of the show. And this is where I said, I kind of sat back up in my seat and said, hey, okay, maybe now it's going to get better. So they go to this familiar-looking star base. It's built up a little bit from the days of Star Trek 3 and what else? The Next Gen it was in, Star Trek 6. And they see the USS Titan, which is supposed to be a refit of the original Titan, which looked nothing like this. But we'll suspend disbelief yet again for the laziness involved. And it's a Neo-Constitution class ship, so I really kind of like the Titan. I like the way it was designed, especially the saucer section. This saucer looks a lot like my favorite Enterprise, which is the motion picture Enterprise / Enterprise NCC 1701A. And they get on the ship under the guise of a surprise inspection. And this is where it starts to kind of feel a little Wrath of Connie. The old admiral is coming for an inspection on the maiden voyage thing, and he's accompanied by Captain Riker, and they get on. They even have the naval whistle when they board the ship, and there's 7 of 9 to greet them, and there's the crew. They go on the ship, they go to the bridge, and the captain's not there because he's too busy reading logs to be on the maiden launch of his own ship, which is really bizarre. And while we're on the bridge, we're treated to yet another kind of, I don't want to call these callbacks so much as like maybe flat out, theft, plagiarism. In Star Trek Generations, Kirk is introduced to Tamara Sulu's daughter, and now we're treated to Geordi LaForge's daughter, almost the same scene. And then Riker embarrasses her in front of everyone and calls her Crash LaForge because I guess when she was at the Academy, she crashed 2 shuttlecrafts. Like, why would you humiliate your helmsman in front of everyone just before launching on the maiden voyage?
That does not make sense.
Anyway, then, because the captain's missing, they have just enough chairs for Picard and Riker and Seven, who is going to pilot the ship out. And again, it felt very much like Star Trek 2 when Savick piloted the ship out of the space dock on the first voyage. And this is the other thing I like, the music by Stephen Barton. I really like the score in most places because he used classic Star Trek themes from the films. He used the motion picture theme. In this very scene alone, we were treated to Star Trek the motion picture, Jerry Goldsmith. When we see the Titan and they go on board, we are treated to Wrath of Khan, James Horner as they're leaving the space dock, and then a perfect mix, seamless medley from the Star Trek 2 into the Cliff Idleman Star Trek 6 even. You can hear notes from that in there. So that was kind of cool. I like that. This whole part here, aside from the fact that the captain was missing from his own launch, was okay. I like that. There's Seven taking it out. So once they're out of space dock, they go straight to warp, and then the captain wants Picard and Riker to join him for dinner. And again, I started shaking my head because what really bothered me in the first season of Picard was the amount of disrespect that this man has from fellow Starfleet officers. This is one of the most legendary captains in Starfleet. What he accomplished as a captain is legendary. He should be treated with beyond the utmost respect, and instead people just crap all over this guy. And that continues here in this scene here. They meet Captain Shaw. He's a complete standoffish jerk. Picard gives him a bottle of wine from his vineyard in France, and the first thing he does is say, I'm a Malbec guy, I don't like this.
Hey bud, what's your problem?
And then he starts mocking something about your legendary exploits and flaunting of the rules, or whatever he says, something to that effect. Like they're like they used to do with Captain Kirk. Like this whole J.J. Abrams, Alex Kurtzman thing, Star Trek, is that they take like little bits and pieces of Star Trek lore, like the idea that Captain Kirk was this like legendary rule breaker, and just run with it and make him constantly break rules, almost like irresponsibly and haphazardly. And that's not the case. And they're kind of doing that here now with Riker and Picard. And it just, it really bugs me. And they tell him that as part of the inspection, they want him to go all the way to the fringe of Federation space and, kind of drop them off. And he's like, well, that's ridiculous. It's it's the opposite way, and it's really far. And Riker's like, well, just double your speed and get there in half the time. Like, first of all, this journey they want to take should take months. But in JJ Star Trek, it takes hours because science is optional now. So anyway, and then, another thing that bugged me is, he says, well, I'm not doing that, which I don't blame him for that. But then he has to take shots at him. He's like, well, Picard says, I'm an admiral. And he says, yeah, retired. Congratulations on that. And then Riker says, yeah, well, I'm a captain. And he said, without a ship. And basically says, blow me. And then he gets up and excuses. Oh, and then before he gets up and excuses himself, he says, oh, and you, Picard, spent, you were half Borg for some time, or you spent time as a Borg, which is such a cheap shot.
You dick!
And mind you, we were told earlier in the show, when she's not called 7 of 9 anymore, she's now called Annika Hansen. It's because the captain didn't want her to use her Borg name. He doesn't hold her responsible for being a Borg for like her entire life, adult life anyway. But he takes a shot at Picard for being a Borg for a week. So, and like he chose to do that, like either of them chose to do that. It's just not well written. It's just not good. I am really perplexed as we go forward here about like the people who are just raving about this. Has the bar been set that low that when something sort of decent comes along, we have to praise it to, world's end? Maybe we do. I don't know. So anyway, he says he leaves, and he says, I hope you enjoy your accommodations. It was the best we could do on short notice, and they're stuck in one tiny little guest cabin in bunks, which is, it was kind of funny. So they go to 7, or 7 goes to them. 7 was in the room. That's right. See, I'm already forgetting a lot of this because it was just like, is it over yet? I kept checking I hit the little button on my remote to see how much time was left because it was like, this is tedious. And 7 kind of agrees that she'll help them out because it's Beverly and they've got to go help Beverly. So she takes them and they take a shuttle and off they go. And it's kind of funny too because when they get out to, this, there's a nebula out there. When they get to the fringe of the Federation space there's like a thunderstorm in space. Complete with sound effects that wake up the captain. Now, anyone who knows even the littlest bit about, and I know they make the spaceships have rumbling sounds and whatnot, but the idea is in the vacuum of space there is no sound. So there's no way this ion storm outside the window should wake the captain up because he shouldn't hear it.
Does that make sense? Ladies and gentlemen, I am not making any sense. None of this makes sense.
And he finds out that they've gone the wrong way to help Picard and Riker, and he's really mad at 7 and lectures her and reprimands her and then leaves her in charge of the ship to go back to bed or wherever he's going. Who knows? And then he doesn't even try to retrieve them in the shuttlecraft they stole. He just lets them go. So I guess we have a Starfleet captain who doesn't give a shit what happens to these 2 senior officers. It's like, let them go. If they die, they die, right?
Probably nothing. Thin, very thin.
So meanwhile, on the planet Raffi's on, which is called, by the way, Metalis Prime, and for those of you who might not be aware, Terry Metalis is the new showrunner. So, wow, how do you like them apples?
My God, the stone's on you.
And she finds out that the Red Lady there's a statue of Rachel Garrett from the Star Trek The Next Generation episode Yesterday's Enterprise. She was captain of the Enterprise C, and in that episode she has to go back to, she came through a time rift, she has to go back through the time rift to set history straight, and she's supposedly killed by a Romulan ambush when she goes back. So there's a statue they have of her, and something horrible is going to happen, and Raffi speeds across Metalis Prime, and she's trying to call people at Starfleet, and nobody's listening or answering, and then she, just in time, she witnesses this Doctor Strange. I think it's evil Doctor Strange from one of the multiverses. The building she sees with this big Starfleet emblem on top, very much like the JJ Star Trek Into Darkness. Get to see the Starfleet headquarters building just completely get destroyed. So it gets encircled by light and it falls into the ground, and then a vortex opens up in the sky and the whole building falls. The rubble comes smashing down. Like, see those buildings back there, somewhere back there. Then we go back to Picard and Riker on the shuttle, and they get to Beverly's ship, and they go and board it. And as they're there, they're startled by someone on the ship, and it turns out to be Beverly's son, named Jack. It's not Wesley. It's Jack Crusher. So again, with the callback, Star Trek II, very similar situation with the David Marcus Captain Kirk thing. Presumably, this son of Beverly Crusher's is Jean-Luc's, and she, for whatever reason, decided to take off and end their relationship and hide Jack from him, much like Carol did with David, because she doesn't want him running around the galaxy with his father. But we get that whole kind of, I don't need no man, deadbeat dad kind of thing that's prevalent in most modern entertainment these days.
What are you people? On dope?
Anyway, they find the ashen remains of whoever she killed. They find Beverly in stasis, and then this big evil looking, it looks to me like a Romulan ship or something, but I don't know, whatever. In the JJ universe too, the bigger the ship, the more evil you are, so clearly this is an evil person coming.
Learn it, know it, live it.
It wasn't very good. It was disappointing, in my opinion. So what did I like? Well, there were things I did like. The aforementioned USS Titan. I did like that. And again, I mentioned the music that went along with this whole scene. This whole scene was the best thing. What I didn't like, though, and I'm so sick of this in this JJ universe, everything's dark. Everything's dystopian. Everything's just void of color. Everything's got a blue tint, a specter of coldness around it. And a lot of that has to do with Bad Robot and Secret Hideout mandating that. The newest episode of the podcast, Inglorious Treksperts, has Terry Matalas and Jonathan Frakes as guests, and they kind of admit in there, Frakes comes right from Frakes, says that they are strongly encouraged, I think he put it strongly encouraged, basically pushed to retain the aesthetic that JJ created in his crappy movies, his Elseworld Star Trek movies. So they have to keep that aesthetic. And in defense of Terry Matalas, whatever he's trying to do, he's got to operate within those confines. So I expected a lot to feel more like Star Trek. It didn't. It feels like bad movie Star Trek. It feels like that the Terry Matalas, it seems like his love of Star Trek comes from the feature films more than the actual television series. Up to that point, and I'm going to go back now, I'm actually watching Star Trek Enterprise over the last 2 months or so. I got them on Blu-ray, and I didn't watch it when it came out. I kind of was burned out on the Star Trek, and I just didn't want to watch a prequel, especially one that kind of smokes canon here and there. Just kind of blows it up to invent its own. Like, Captain Archer should have been Captain Robert April, like right there, missed opportunity. But this was about as dark as Star Trek ever got. I'm talking aesthetic-wise, I'm not talking about content-wise. if you look at the bridge of the NX-01, it's kind of muted and dark. But it was still brightly lit, and it still had that Star Trek optimism. And it's funny how when this series came out in the early 2000s, it was kind of darker, a little less optimistic and fun, especially in seasons 3 and 4. 4 had some really great Star Trek. Season 3 was really dark, and then Captain Archer was borderline sadistic in several episodes. They kind of changed his character. In seasons 1 and 2, he was kind of optimistic and wild-eyed, and oh boy, we're going exploring, classic Star Trek. But the network, I think, at the time had this is tired. We've been doing this for, 30 years now. Do something different. So they did something different. But it just didn't seem, it was uneven. It didn't seem right. It didn't feel very Star Trek-y at times. Then came all this J.J. Abrams Secret Hideout stuff. And when you go back and watch this now, in hindsight, this is more Star Trek than anything they put out now. This feels more Star Trek-y. Season 3 got a little ridiculous toward the end, but compared to this stuff, I cannot take the darkness. I cannot take the dystopian bleakness. And I don't want to judge Picard Season 3 solely on one episode, but it's clear they're not going to be able to shed those aesthetics. They're not going to be able to shed that overarching world that was created prior to them with Star Trek Discovery and Picard Seasons 1 and 2. And that's going to hinder it no matter what they do with the characters. And I'm tired of the deconstruction. 7 of 9, Beverly Crusher, and Picard have all been altered into unrecognizable characters. And I'd also like to mention, by the way, when we first see Picard and he's writing his letters, he's got glasses on. I thought he was in an android body. Do androids need glasses? Does anyone in the 25th century need glasses? McCoy gave Captain Kirk a pair of glasses for his birthday because Kirk was allergic to Retinax 5, which cures ailing eyesight. Why does Picard need glasses? It's the little details that are missed that really bug me. I do like the font they used. Very Wrath of Connie. In fact, if I scroll this up... Can I scroll this up? No. Yes. Yeah, so there's the Wrath of Khan open. There's the Picard open. So you can see that was nice. But there isn't much else. A lot of member berries. There was a lot of member berries that polished the turd of seasons 1 and 2. It just, the stank still exists. You can put an air freshener in a stinky bathroom, but eventually the air freshener will run out and the stank will come back. So I don't know. I'm not going to give it a number review, but I'm just going to say I was disappointed. I just don't see what all the hype is about, and maybe we will going forward. I hope I have the energy to stay with it. I'll give it 3 episodes. If I'm not convinced by episode 3, I'll be done with it, just like I was before. But yeah, love to know what you guys think. If you've watched it, do you think it was overhyped? Do you think it was underhyped? Smash that like button if so inclined. You can give me a dislike, call me an idiot, whatever you want to do. But please, if you are so inclined as well, subscribe to this little channel as we continue to grow. So that's it for me. I'm not a fan of Star Trek Picard. Not yet, anyway. Got to be convinced. See you next time. Bye-bye. If you enjoyed this video, please give us a thumbs up below. Also, please subscribe to GeekTime TV. It really helps us grow the channel. And make sure you hit that bell icon in order to receive notifications every time we drop new content here. You can also check us out on social media on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at GeekTimeNet. Thanks again for watching. We will see you soon.
Say, kids, what time is that?